Hey, y'all.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea up late and my invisible co-host, Brian Sanders of Brian Sanders Disruptors. He's working on a little bit of technical stuff here with this camera, but welcome back. It's good to see you all. See you guys in the chats. If you are a first timer here, this is a live YouTube show. It's a true crime show, so if you're here, you know what you can expect. That said, if you log into Facebook, or excuse me, not Facebook, what am I, 94? Also, who am I kidding? I use Facebook all the time. But if you log into YouTube, it's free. Just log into your account. You can create one with an email and a password, and you can always join the chats and chit chat with us a little bit at the beginning. We try to answer questions if they arise during the discussion of a case, and certainly at the end, we like to banter with our buddies in the chats. That said, tonight is actually a super important case. We were not with you guys last week. Actually, I feel like it's been a weird month. We've had a lot of things going on. Yes. We've had Halloween, which is a very big thing in our world. We had the presidential election was last week of 2024, so that was huge. We did not have a show that night. We felt it was more important to eat a whole bunch of junk food and watch that. And here we are. But between last week and this week, some huge developments have happened in a case that we covered. I don't know. I think I've covered it a couple of times now. The Delphi murders. If you guys remember, Abby and Libby were the girls' names. They were 13 and 14 years old and were murdered in Delphi, Indiana in 2017. Actually, the day before Valentine's Day in 2017. It has always been the most insane case in terms of what we initially, up until maybe just days ago, thought that everything was just really well handled. And that's the reason the public did not have knowledge of the case in the sense of the details, right? So we talk about this kind of thing all the time. If you are new here, Brian, who when his camera's up and running, you'll be able to see him. Otherwise, he will be able to chime in from an audio standpoint. I think we'll try you here.
Hopefully.
And move you around. We'll see. We'll see if that works. Welcome on, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
Buddy. Old pal. Newsflash, buddy.
It looks like we got company.
Okay. So if you have been here from the beginning, then you know, or following this case, again, it was kept very tight-lipped. So what I was going to say is that Brian Sanders is a retired homicide lieutenant. So if you did not know that, just know that provides a lot of insight when we talk about cases and investigations and whatnot. And so huge proponents for law enforcement over here, but also if there's negligence or even cover-ups, we talk about that as well. So we've found all kinds of strange things as we've covered case after case, week after week for the last quite a while. In saying that, though, so Delphi, my goodness, we did not know, meaning the collective public, did not know details on, anything. We knew the day the murders took place, approximately. We knew where their bodies were found. We knew that a man, because of video that we will discuss in a moment, ushered them, quote, down the hill. That's why this murder is also called the Down the Hill murder. There's actually a podcast of that same name, and multiple other articles of that same name. So we know that they went down this hill and that their bodies were found. So from 2017 until just very, very recently, we did not know. We could have, I think, ascertained, but we do not know the murder weapon, the manner of death, what the scene looked like, what the bodies were like, what evidence they did or did not have. And that's all actually very good. We talk about that often on this show. Sometimes people, look, I'm a fan of Reddit as much as anyone is, but oftentimes people get that kind of skewed. I know that with Asia Degree, that's been, there's been some big movements in that giant case. But in saying that, I read comments a lot that people are saying, why haven't the cops let us know this whole time? Or why have they been sitting on this information? Or how do they just now know this? And we have to understand that that's not how that works. We have no rights to that information. That's not like privileged information for the public, right? So to preserve the integrity of some of these cases like this, particularly these super bizarre cases, it's of the utmost importance, in fact, that the public does not know this. We know that people call in false tips. We know that people use information that they hear about a case to then, falsely admit to, confess to things. And so there's just all kinds of reasons. Either way, in saying that, this case has always been kept insanely quiet. And now I'm going to let you guys hear what we have to say tonight and determine if it was kept quiet for what I thought all these years, because it was just handled so well and they kept this information out of the public's eye, or have things been done very, very differently. So the big breaking news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, is that between last week and this week, the jury was out. So last year in October of 22, a man named Richard Allen was charged with the murders of Abby and Libby. Okay. So that was a while ago. Time has gone on. Prosecutors have formulated a case and it went to trial. And the jury just came back with a verdict yesterday, meaning Monday, November 11th. They deliberated over the course of 4 days for a total of about 18 hours. And they did come back with a verdict of guilty on first-degree murder charges for both girls, for Richard Allen. It seems cut and dry. And we will kind of present the case. I'm just going to do like a broad stroke overview of what the actual case looked like before we had any kind of charges or convictions. And then we are going to kind of go back and forth to see what it was that the prosecution had. What did their case actually look like? And while the burden of proof is on them, they have to prove, right, that the suspect committed the crime, right? It's not the defense's job to prove that he didn't. This case, when you hear what the prosecution had, I think it's pretty widely ascertained that there wasn't much. So I don't know. You take a listen, hear what we have to say, and then you decide if this conviction should stand as is, or if we might be seeing an appeal in the near future. That said, Richard Allen is scheduled to be sentenced for this conviction on December 20th. All right, so in just a little over a month. So I think without further ado, although I've already talked so much, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
No. I will.
The shortest response I think you've ever had a day in your whole life. Unfortunately, I think I've written an entire novel on the Delphi case, and it is nowhere to be found in my entire world. So we're just going to be going off of a bunch of other stuff that I had. But again, let's just go over kind of a broad stroke, what the case is, who these girls were, and what led to, unfortunately, their murders in 2017. So I have got some stuff pulled up here. So Abby and Libby, just so you know, again, Libby was 14 and Abby was 13. They were best friends. So they did everything together. They were always at one or the other one's houses. They played in the band. Abby played saxophone. They had a lot of friends. They just were very typical 13 and 14-year-old girls in fairly rural Indiana. So on the day that this all happens, the girls were out of school on February 13th. And so I'm going to show, this little light is going to be stuck in my glasses. And so that day they wanted to go to an area of town where people go for walks and hikes. And so the place is called the Monon High Bridge, is like the, what it's really kind of known as. It's in Carroll County, Indiana. And it's like just kind of like a walking trail park area. And this bridge that we're referencing so much is actually like a decommissioned railroad bridge. I've got a picture I'll put up in a moment of it. But it's kind of what you would think of as like an old railroad bridge. It's very high. I think it's about 63 feet off the ground. And it's just kind of dilapidated railroad ties that span quite a distance over a body of water. Okay. And so it's going to be Deer Creek is the body of water underneath it. And so the girls wanted to go and walk over the bridge. This was not unheard of. Plenty of people did it. So this would be an area, if you have a local kind of hiking trail or walking path in your area that families might go to, or people might walk dogs at, this kind of thing. That's what this was like. So it was moderately populated at any given time. Okay. So the girls had begged to go do this. They had spent the night together the night prior, and they finally talked Kelsey, who is Libby's sister, into taking them, she was a teenager, to driving them and dropping them off at that park so they can walk around. So this would have been on February 13th of 2017. So it was about 1:35 p.m. on that February 13th that Kelsey drops off Libby and Abby there at the park. It's just near the Hoosier Heartland Highway. All right. So they were going to go on that hike over Deer Creek, and it was actually called Deer Creek Township. Okay. So at 2:07 p.m., Abby posted a photo of Libby walking on the bridge. I'll put all of these up in just a moment. So they were using Snapchat. Okay. So as they're walking and talking, picture any teenager on the planet right now, they were playing on their phone, playing on Snapchat. And so, like I said, Abby posted a picture of Libby walking on the bridge. And this was actually on Libby's own phone. And this was at 2:07 p.m. So they had just been dropped off like 30 minutes prior. Okay. They had not been there very long at all. After this photo that Abby posted, the girls were never heard from again. Okay. So that would be the last activity that we know of that they posted on social media or that they had with the outside public. Are you back up or no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You are. Let me get you on for. Okay. And let me go on and just throw a picture up while I read this so you can kind of see what it is I'm talking about in case you're not familiar. So this is the picture that was posted. It's tough to see actually now, of Libby by her girlfriend Abby. Okay. And this is the bridge that I was telling you about. Again, I think it's like 63 feet off or elevated off of that Deer Creek down below. You can see there, it's just kind of, it was February in Indiana. So there's no leaves on the trees. You know, it's kind of a wooded area back there. And the girls just have on like jeans and jackets, and they're just having a fun afternoon. Here is a picture of the bridge, another kind of vantage point there to give you an idea. Okay, so I'm going to go on and put a picture of Abby and Libby up doing some silly stuff. It's just a picture. That's Libby standing up, kind of striking a pose there, dancing, and that's Abby sitting down in the gray and green hoodie. Okay, so I'm going to keep that up while I read to you a little bit about the events that unfold then. So again, that photo was posted at 2:07 and no one hears from them again. So finally, Dad gets there. Abby's dad was set to pick them up at 3:15. So think about that. They were only even supposed to have been gone for not even 2 full hours before a parent was coming to get them. And so he had come at 3:15. He can't find them. He kind of calls a couple other family members. And so then at 5, they kind of walk around through the park and try to find the girls. Finally, when nothing happens, they go on and call authorities at 5:30 that evening. So the police get there. They start searching the area pretty quickly, but they were not suspecting anything necessarily bad initially. They just thought maybe the girls weren't meeting up when they were supposed to have. So this goes on for a while. And finally, on the next day, let me see if I have a time for you here. On the next day, on February 14th, volunteers began a search for the girls. The search starts to expand. And then later that afternoon, their bodies were found in an area near the hiking trail. And this would be down by that Deer Creek that I just told you about. Okay. So what we know now in terms of details of the case, in terms of the scene, these kinds of things, none of this was known for like the whole time until this trial started. And so we just started getting snippets of these things like day by day as the trial would conclude, because then it became public knowledge. There have not been cameras in the courtroom. I believe that they said that you could bring a pen and a notepad was the only kind of reporting that could have been done in the courtroom. So the girls were found on the 15th, February 15th. Law enforcement confirms that they were the bodies, in fact, of Abby and Libby. So the state police, so you're going to hear me say ISP, that's the Indiana State Police. We're going to have 2 or 3 different organizations that are covering this case and canvassing the area and going on to investigate. But when you hear ISP, that's Indiana State Police. And so they released images that were found on Abby's phone to the public, saying that they believed that this would have been the suspected killer. So what was the only thing that was initially released in 2017 was this photo here. That's as good as it gets. That's the quality of it. That's how it is. And this guy would later on over the years be known to be referred to as BG or Bridge Guy. All right. So the girls were walking, and without this guy even knowing it, they're just, again, filming each other on Snapchat and being silly and taking pictures. And with this, they are inadvertently now filming potentially what was their killer. Okay. So that is Bridge Guy. So when I say that state police released images discovered on her phone, that's what that was. It was that image of that gentleman there wearing kind of a, what looks like an outdoor, like a Carhartt type, right? A kind of worker's outdoor jacket or coat, a pair of kind of baggy light wash jeans and darker shoes. There's been discrepancies over the years of whether or not that was his hair on top of his head, like shaggy hair, or if it was a hat, like some sort of like a beanie on top of his hair. So they released this to the public saying they think that this is the guy who killed the girls. So time's going by. Now it's about a week later, and about a week after the murders, the Indiana State Police released the audio recording of a male voice that says "down the hill." I'll post it on Instagram, but it's literally those 3 words. And for 2 years, the only thing the public knew about this case was that that gentleman on that phone, that picture I showed you, existed, and the words "down the hill," the audio "down the hill." Okay. And that's pretty much it. Nothing happens. They release this original sketch, and pay attention to this. So this is the sketch that was released in 2017, just after the murders, the same month of the murders. Okay. It's a sketch, if you are just listening, of a younger, fuller faced male with kind of closer cropped, curly, wavy hair. Looks like he's got fairly narrow eyes, thinner lips, fairly symmetrical, angular chin. And the description says, white, age 20, brown curly hair, medium build. So this was the very original 2017 sketch and description per a witness. All right. Age 20, curly hair. It's interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what we know now. And that's what we're going to get to. So that sat. So for 2 years, in terms of the public, nothing budged. So that's all the public had to go off of for 2 years, until finally in April of 2019, a new sketch of the suspect was released. And at this point, they released the video with what they considered to be extended audio. The extended audio only included, the only difference there was the word guys. So now it's guys down the hill. Okay, so for 2 years you had down the hill, and then you get guys down the hill, and you get a new sketch. So let's see if I have it here for you, and I certainly hope so. Maybe it didn't upload. I'll grab it in a moment when I'll get Brian to talking, and I'll throw it on here for you. And I think he is back. Okay, so nope. Nope. All right, that's gonna have to work. Maybe.
We'll see. We'll see if I can get
something. Yep. All right. So again, 2 years later, we get the extended cut that says "guys down the hill" and a new sketch, which I will show you. So what do you say initially when you hear what I've said? When you hear about this guy, you hear a little bit about what they've released to the public and what they haven't.
Yeah, which is pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
You hold on to everything. You don't even release a composite sketch unless you absolutely have to find some unknown witnesses. You know what I mean? Like, because once you put that composite out there or any of that information out there, you could potentially start to get flooded with information that citizens are providing that may get you distracted from the actual investigation.
Okay.
Not on purpose, just because people want to help. So as soon as something goes out like that, they feel like they're part of the investigation. So when they release a composite drawing like that, or any kind of information, it's to get information from the public.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So it's one of those that, they probably felt like they had some unknown witnesses out there, or, hey, is this a regular? Is this a guy that's usually out there by the
right.
bridge?
And I believe that's precisely what they were doing. They were trying to gather information, or they thought that they had, I believe they thought they had a strong enough witness base that sketch would then clue them in. So I'm going to go on and I'm going to go on and put up this other sketch, because I think it's important to see in the 2 years that went by, some things that changed. Okay. So if you remember, the sketch I just showed you was this. This is what in 2017, young guy, clean shaven face, short crop, curly hair. Oh my goodness. Let's see. All right. Let's try it one more time, y'all. Pardon me for the silence here. There we go. This is what was then released in 2017. Actually, there was a different one that looks just like this, but with a scruffy beard. Okay. Is what was released in 2017. I believe that this is what they posted to, let's see. You got anything to contribute in the moment?
No, just that once, like that drawing there,
when
once
you
it
see
starts
the difference
to look
between the two.
Yes. Yeah. That then, I don't know. I'm kind of getting ahead of us, but you also are opening yourself up to whatever you, as an investigator or agency, whatever you deem that drawing as, suspect, witness, person of interest. Mm-hmm. Usually, if you're smart, you just kind of say, said police department is looking to talk to this person in regards to potentially witnessing a crime, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So I want you guys to pay attention again. Page on Instagram, and then I'll get on with the facts and read more of the case here, so as not to bore you. But if you are watching, look at that, because here's the original sketch one more time. I mean, a considerably younger individual. Is that what you're seeing? Is that your first thought?
Yes. If you're just looking at two composite drawings, yeah. The other one with like the scally cap.
Yeah, there's a lot more to be said in differences here, but I think big, huge conclusion is a very obvious difference in age. The second photo here, this guy looks a solid 20 years or so older, I would say, than the first sketch. Yeah. This guy's got kind of shaggier hair that does not look curly in nature. He's got some an unshaven face with more of a defined goatee, different shaped nose, different shaped eyes. It's all very different. You can see on either side of this photo as well, the still images of the gentleman walking on the bridge. That at this point in the investigation, the law enforcement thought that he was definitely the suspect in this killing. Mm-hmm. And on each one of those photos, you can see what I meant when I said they couldn't determine whether or not it was some sort of a hat on top of his head or long, kind of shaggy brown hair on top. It's very difficult. It's very grainy, and you can, I think, kind of make yourself see it either way when you look at it like that. So all this stuff was done, guys. So all kinds of AI type work was done to try to, gather what his gait would look like based off of what the renderings they have from this Snapchat video, and, his height and all these kinds of things. So that's what we have in terms of the sketches. Okay. So let's see. Let's get back to where we were. So then fast forward, it's 2021. So the murders took place in 17. In 19, we get the new sketch and the extended audio with the word guys. And then now it's 2021. So there was some information released in the killings, the Indiana State Police did, that appealed to the public for tips about a person tied to a social media account. Okay. It was later revealed that this guy has a whole different new ring. We're going to talk about this guy named Keegan Klein. Okay, let's see here. I'm so sorry. My notes are all over the place. So in February, let's see here. Yep, February 25th of 2017. That's where we need to be. We have the Indiana State Police and the FBI. They executed a search warrant that linked to this account called Anthony Shots. All right. So this was a social media account. So they get to Miami County, that's in Indiana, according to court documents. And so they eventually found a man identified as Keegan Klein. Okay, so we discussed him the first time or two we covered this case. So Keegan Klein told police that he'd use social media accounts to talk to underage girls. At some point, I will upload those photos as well, because the photo of Anthony Shots on social media versus the reality of Keegan Klein is the entire reason you tell your children to be incredibly careful with their activity online. So Anthony Shots actually was the catfishing photo that Keegan Klein used to talk to underage girls. Keegan Klein was like 30 years old, morbidly obese, and he wound up having mounds of child assault material, if you will. We're live, so sometimes we got to be careful with our verbiage. So if I say CSAM, that would be child, certain kind of assault material. Okay, so I think you can gather that. So he had just an incredible amount of that stuff. And this guy had actually been in communication with the girls. Now, his catfish photo actually, unfortunately, wound up being the photo of a younger man who actually was a police officer, and if I'm not mistaken, like in Alaska or something. But this is the photo that he used to, portray as himself to go talk to these underage girls. Okay, so evidently this Keegan Klein guy, that's his actual name, exchanged messages with more than a dozen underage girls. He received pictures from girls. He said he had about 100 pictures from underage girls that were sexual in nature, in addition to about 20 sexually explicit videos. We later find out that Anthony Shots profile, Keegan Klein's catfishing profile, had been in contact with Abby. And in fact, there are some disputing sources that say that Abby was actually set to meet up with this guy the day of the murders. Okay. So in August of 2020, Keegan Klein was charged with 30 felonies, including possession of the CSAM, child exploitation, obstruction of justice, child solicitation, synthetic identity deception. They they got him for everything they could, thankfully. But his name has become linked to the Delphi murders a ton. And in December of 2021, he appeared in court for a pretrial hearing in that Miami County, Indiana. He's never been charged in their murders. Initially, he was looked at heavily, just obviously because of his background and his proclivities. But in July of 2023, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison after pleading guilty to child exploitation and CSAM material. And that's where he sits now, is in prison, which is the best place for him, if not under the ground.
Yeah.
But weird stuff, and I'm not going to go off just because we have so much more to talk about, but weird stuff was involved with him other than the obvious weird stuff. But his dad's name is Anthony, and there was a time when Keegan Klein said that he thinks his dad to the area of Deer Creek Trail or the Monon High Bridge. And he waited in the car while his dad, Anthony, exited the car. His dad came back sometime later, and he said his dad was bloody. Now, I don't know what kind of beef those two have going on. Yeah. He's going to either admit to his dad doing these things or throw his dad under the bus for doing these things. But either way, neither one of them have been charged in these murders whatsoever. In fact, I do think that the biggest takeaway was that both of them have phones that pinged at home in their home counties away from where the murders took place the day of. So that would be the strongest thing that they have in their defense.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the Keegan Klein piece. We'll put that aside for now. A man booked in the Carroll County, Indiana jail in connection with the Delphi murders, and this was Richard Allen. Okay. They moved him to a state facility. What they said was for his safety. He had been in the local jail when he was first booked and arrested. They moved him over. Actually, the judge that presided over this case is the one who signed the paper to move him to the big, he was in maximum security pretrial. And she is the one who actually, the other judge stepped down and she took over this case at this time in October of 2022. We're going to talk about why that date is a bit significant later on as time goes on when we talk about this case. So, he was officially arrested on October 31st of 2022, this Richard Allen, okay? So let's talk about what this means. Richard Allen worked at the local CVS there. He had printed photos. Abby's grandmother knew who he was. They didn't know him personally, but again, it's a smaller town. It's the local CVS. If you're in there enough, you would know that. And so I want you to know a little bit more about Richard Allen. So also on a side note, though, the Keegan Klein guy, there was just a lot of other weirdness, like Peep and Tom type instances. We've talked about this. That is going to have a tendency to escalate. So this guy needs to be put away one way or another, whether or not he's involved in this whatsoever. So let's see here. So remember I told you about the two different composite sketches that were put out. So we've got in 2017, it was, I believe, on February 18th. So 4 days after the girls' bodies were found, Richard Allen, who later, subsequently years later, was arrested for this. He and his wife were having a discussion, and she said, "Oh, hey, like you went to Deer Creek Trail that day, like when these murders took place." And he was like, "Yeah, I was there." Well, he was there because he went there fairly often. Remember before I said this is a place where people would go and have picnics or walk their dogs or get exercise or just a leisurely stroll. So it was not odd for Richard Allen to be there. It was not his first or only time there. So his wife mentions to him, her name is Kathy, that, hey, police are looking to talk to anybody who was there that day. Like, this is crazy. This horrible thing happened to these girls. Police are frantic for any information that they can get. And they want to talk to, anybody who could have been around that area at that time, right? And that's very typical. And so Richard immediately says, okay, he's like, oh, wow, okay, do you think I need to talk to them? And she said, I guess, go let them at least know maybe you know something or saw something, right? So he says, okay. And he talks to the Indiana State Police. He tells them that he was there. He tells them what time he was there. He says at the time, somewhere between like 1 and 3, that he had been at his mother's house. He had the day off work that day, and he had been in his mother's house the first part of the day and then went there to walk around. They asked him multiple questions. He answered them all. He was very forthcoming. They asked him if he saw anything unusual. He says no. He did say he thought he saw, he said, I think I saw like a group of 3 girls maybe on the bridge. And he said, I don't know. I really wasn't paying that much attention. And he stock ticker on his phone. So I know this is something Brian Sanders might know a little something about, but if there's, you can get, real-time stock updates, right? So it's like kind of going up and down as you're walking. And he said that he had been staring at his stock ticker on his phone and not really paying that much attention to his surroundings. Okay. So Richard Allen talked to investigators for a few minutes. They didn't seem to think that anything was weird with that. And he goes about his way. So it wasn't until in 2022, so 5 years go by, and at this point, they've called in new people to kind of look over the case, look through old filings. I'm trying to fix these because they got a big glare on them, to look at findings and whatnot. And this woman finds, I've got her name here, she, in looking at anything new that could have transpired, she looks back at the file for the case and sees this document. So, let me see where we are. Okay. And it actually has that he was cleared. So when she finds this old document with Richard Allen's initial interview, it says that he was, quote, cleared by the interviewing detective. Now, the reason that no one had seen it in those 5 years is because while his name is Richard Allen, it was documented as, I believe, Richard Allen Whitegood or something like that. Well, that last name, that W, that's actually the street he lives on. That's not his last name. So it was filed under W, under the wrong last name. Okay. Which these mistakes happen. That doesn't necessarily implicate him one way or another. This is on, they find this and it's like, what is going on here? So they find this and they say, well, let's look at everything. Would you find that to be pretty normal?
Yeah. And anytime you go back through, especially any kind of unsolved case, you do just that. Every note, handwritten note, every supplement that was filed, you go back and make sure supplements that were filed or followed up. You do all of
that. So that's what they do. And when they do, they decide to start looking back into the idea of Richard Allen. This was October 2022, everyone, okay? 5 years after the murders, 5 years after he was initially interviewed and cleared. So evidently they had not been making headway. There wasn't much movement on this case. And I think that's a little different than what people thought. I think the general public thought they know things that we don't know, which would be normal, and they're keeping it really close.
Mm-hmm.
And, they've just got to build this case because you get one, right? One and done. We talk about it all the time. Slow down, build a proper case so that when you try it, you can gather that conviction. So what happens is the local investigator there that had talked to Allen says that he looks up what vehicles he's driving. He sees the two different kinds of vehicles registered to Richard Allen. And then he goes back through footage around that bridge, around that time, around Deer Creek Trail. Okay. Remember when he spoke with Richard the first time, Richard voluntarily came thinking he was doing what the public was supposed to do and say, hey, yeah, I was at the bridge this day. This is what I saw. I didn't see anything else. We good? Okay, cool. Thanks. Happy to help. So because Richard had already admittedly been there that day, that's why he's looking at footage. There was an old CPS building that is where Richard is believed to have parked. And there is a store on the corner there that had a camera on it. So this is what's collecting the traffic footage, and this is how they're gathering some of their information. When investigator looks at this 5 years later, he says, oh, this car looks similar to the make and model that Richard Allen owns. He did not get a plate number. The video did not show any plate number. He said the rims look similar, and I think the words were that, and that could be him behind the wheel. So this is kind of grainy traffic cam footage, right, of this car that goes by. So with this information, they decide to talk to Richard Allen again, which that, again, fine, right? We're going to re-talk to all witnesses. We're going to just kind of start fresh with this. That's fine. They bring him back in. It's been 5 years, okay? In 5 years, the only thing that changed with Richard's story is initially he said he was there from like 1 to 3-ish. And this time he says, 1:30 to 3:30, which with your experience, would you say that 5 years later, a 30-minute window on time difference either way, would that cause alarm for you?
No.
Okay.
No. The only time you're even going to be that accurate with time frames usually is if you have references like, oh, I had to be at work at 3, or I know I got off at 1:30, or that sort of thing.
So that's the only difference in his story. So they continue to press him at this point, and they ask him if he has any guns. And he says, yeah, I've got a couple of them. They say, well, have you lent them out or let anyone borrow them or sold any of them? And he says, no. And they ask him if he has knives, and he says, yes. None of which, my friends, is a crime, okay? And please bear in mind that by the end of this, I'm not saying that I feel like Richard Allen is necessarily innocent. I don't know. But we're just going to talk about the idea of probable cause and what this conviction looks like. So they continue to interrogate him. Then they ask if they can look at his phone. They ask if they can get his passwords. And initially he says, yeah. He was like, sure. But then they're like, do you own any Carhartt type jackets? And he's like, yeah, I have a black one and I have a blue one. And they're like, okay, what kinds of shoes would you have been wearing that day? And he said, oh gosh, it's been 5 years. It would have either been, and he lists a certain pair of tennis shoes. He was like, or my work boots, I guess. That's kind of all I ever wear. So he's very forthcoming, answering all their questions, not showing attitude, not showing aggression. And also we often will have the cases we talk about where either someone is overly detailed, or fully closed off. And it seems that he's being neither. It seems to be a pretty typical give and go in this second interview with him, again 5 years later. So as they press, he starts to say, well, wait a minute, hold up, like I gave you all these answers before, I'm happy to talk to you, but what's going on here? And then he starts to kind of say, like, I feel like you're kind of pressing, like I feel like you're that their phrases were just, they do go on to say that I think during this interview is when they start telling him they have witnesses that he was there, which they later say was an interview technique, that they lied to have the technique.
I don't like that.
And so he's like, whoa. And he said, well, they said that we've got you on a video. And he said, well, if the video is from one of the victims, you don't have me. And then he starts saying, hey, look, I don't know these girls. You can find the transcripts from these interviews. But he says quite literally, I don't know these girls. And he said, I'm telling you, I saw a group of, I think, 3 girls walking on the bridge. I was looking at my phone. I don't know the 2 girls that are dead. I don't know them. I didn't have anything to do with this. I wouldn't have been near them. They don't have video of me, X, Y, Z, right? So they continue to press further and ask him if they can at least maybe just search his house. And, this is just normal. It's what we do. Can we look at your belongings? Can we look in your car? And at first he had been fine with it. But as they press and they start saying that they have video of him and these kinds of things, he was like, whoa, maybe not. And he was like, let me at least just talk. He didn't even talk about a lawyer. He just talked about his wife. He said, let me just talk to my wife first and see if this is something we want to do. And I think his words were quite literally, I just really don't want to be more involved with this than I have to be. And I can't say I blame him. I guess if I'm guilty or innocent of it, but if I'm innocent of this crime, and I'm happy to give you my witness statement and help you in any way I can. Also, we're talking about searching my property. This is a whole different ballgame now. Like this sounds very terrifying. So a little bit of time goes by and they sure enough show up at his house with a search warrant. So this is the one thing that Brian and I have talked about quite a lot in regards to this case, is the fact that you have to have what's called PC, or probable cause, right? You have to have a probable cause affidavit to search. So when you see people now, everybody's, all tough with their dash cams and body cams, and that's fine. And they're recording all of their, any encounter with law enforcement when they get pulled over at a traffic stop. And, you can't search me. And half the time the cop's like, I wasn't even going to, like, whatever, and people want to exercise their rights there. Well, look, your right is that your home and vehicles won't be searched unless there is a probable cause. So would you say that it's something like this? Maybe explain what types of things or how specific do you need to gain probable cause?
Yeah, this is for him very, very specifically, and this applies to general terms. Things like if your vehicle that's registered to you is actually on video, entering a crime scene, let's say a park, where only one vehicle is seen going in a 6-hour period.
And let me clarify that. You mean registered to you, meaning you can see the tag number?
Yes. The tag number is legible. It's registered to you. And then that's your vehicle going into, say, that area. Okay, so you've got that. Then let's say a picture like that from the victim's phone that you look very similar to that picture, posted in a social media post.
Okay.
And that's helped clear a lot of cases. A certain jersey number, a certain name or something, a memorial shirt of someone who was shot and killed.
not funny. I'm sorry.
And then and you can work small things like that, and then as you present your case or you start to build what's called probable cause, it has to be probable. In other words, you can't just say this guy says he was there that day, therefore we think he's involved. Like it, you have to be, there has to be something there.
Right.
It can't just be that. And you and I've talked about it in this case, and it seems to be lacking. But a lot of times it's things like that. There can also be person describes the suspect. You have the vehicle. You have the tag. You also have three witnesses that witnessed a crime. You can use photo lineups.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a person of interest that you figured out from the registered owner of that car,
gotcha.
Put them in a photo lineup, and a witness points them out. Cool. And then you... Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
but none of those things were had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we can keep listing what you're supposed to have, which is what I asked you precisely, but none of it was had. So the best that they have, and I've got my notes here from when he was arrested a couple of years ago, because that was my question then. What was their PC to search in the first place? Because as you all know, okay, there's a trial, there's a murder trial, and there's a conviction. But if initially speaking, there was not probable cause for the search warrant that then elicited whatever evidence the prosecution based a case off of, this conviction is no longer valid. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important. It's why we're harping on it. But even 2 years ago, I wrote probable cause affidavit from Carroll Circuit Court in Delphi, Indiana. And this was in quotes. Okay. As male subject approaches, one of the girls says gun. The girls proceed down the hill and the video ends. Clothes found in Deer Creek south of their bodies. It was unspent and it had... Oh, the internet's doing this. I apologize for the internet, guys. I'm not sure what is going on.
It's tonight. Not us. Everybody's saying it's apparently YouTube did an update or something.
Oh, fantastic. This is all part of what they considered to be the probable cause affidavit. The vehicle was parked strangely, backed it to building. It was the old CPS building. A video shows it leave at 2:28 p.m. Stated later saw the same man walking north away from the bridge. He was muddy and bloody, looked like he'd been in a fight. This was a witness statement. And then on October 13th of 2022, they procured the search warrant. But it was based off of what I just gave you, which was absolutely generic information. Mm-hmm. So when you said that, like, for instance, if a car... It's still doing it. For instance, if a car is being seen that is their vehicle, that could be probable cause. They didn't have that. Yeah. So I'll argue that one until I'm blue in the face here. With that. So, I'm considering just...
I think our audio is good. It's just the camera keeps clicking out.
So that happened 5 years after his initial interview, and they took that information, got a search warrant, and searched Richard Allen's home and property and vehicles. There they find a Carhartt jacket in his dresser, jeans in his dresser, all of which he said that he owned. He never said he never owned any of these things. And my point earlier when I was speaking with Brian about it is it's rural Indiana. I would venture to say 30 to 40% of males have Carhartt jackets there. So it wasn't some obscure item either. It's not like this smoking gun that they have this piece of clothing. So the bullet that I mentioned, the girls' bodies, which for all these years until just during this trial, so until just the past couple of weeks, we didn't know anything about the scene. Finally, they did come out to say a while back that it was extremely bloody, but that's all we really knew. And so we did learn that there had been a .40 caliber unspent round, meaning this had not been fired through the chamber of the weapon. It was a live round that had not yet been fired, but had been discharged from the weapon for whatever reason. So Brian will make the point of, you rack the slide back, it's going to pop out. Maybe he had a jam, maybe he had a whatever. It's come out of the gun without being fired, but it did contain extraction marks, which for the most part are kind of like fingerprints and are going to be individual to the gun that it came out of. All right. This bullet was found between the two girls' bodies. Now, when they search Richard Allen's home, with or without probable cause, they find again the clothing, and then they find a 40 caliber weapon, a gun that matches the unspent bullet at the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to talk at length about that. But ultimately speaking, this was the smoking gun, if you will. That bullet is the one thing that tied Richard Allen to the case, to the murder, to the scene, to the girls. There was nothing else. Okay, so in saying that, the trial starts. The prosecution's case is pretty much just that. It's what I've said. We have since learned a little bit more. So we've learned the position of the girls' bodies, which we're going to talk about. We've learned that Libby was nude. All of her clothes had been removed. Abby was wearing clothing, but it was bizarre. Okay, so Abby was lying face up. She had on blue jeans, but no underwear. Okay, so Abby, for all purposes, you can assume that Abby was very likely nude when she was murdered and then reclothed. So the one thing we had learned throughout this time of the investigation, as little snippets of information was coming out, was that it was likely that whoever did this either left and came back to revisit the bodies and potentially manipulate them, move them, or did it at the time. But either way, the way the girls were found, and we didn't know the details then, but the way the girls were found were not the positions they were in when they died. Okay, so Abby's body, again, Libby was nude. Abby's body had clothing on, but like, for instance, I said jeans, no underwear. The jeans were on backward. So it's a very, very bizarre crime scene. Okay, so Abby is lying on her back with blue jeans on backward. The back pockets are on top. She's wearing a t-shirt. She's wearing a sweatshirt. The sweatshirt is actually Libby's. She's wearing two bras, her own and Libby's. She's wearing shoes, but no socks. One sock was found in the creek. One has never been found. One of the girls, they haven't told us who, but one pair of underwear is missing. It's never been found. So the only two things that remain unfound from the crime scene is one pair of underwear and one sock. Let it be known that it was never found at Richard Allen's house or anywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we talk about souvenirs. This is very likely looking like a type of a crime scene that would occur from someone who might keep a souvenir. Mm-hmm. If potentially a sexual motivation or a serial, offender would be involved, and we don't know that yet. Okay, so Abby or Libby, like I said, was nude, and she was lying also on her back. Her arms, one arm was outstretched straight up over her head, one was straight down, and her legs were straight out. Abby had one knee bent at almost a 90-degree angle, and tucked under the other straight leg. And her arms were up. If you're watching me, you can see what I'm doing here. Otherwise, they were bent at the elbow with her fist kind of resting on her chest. So her arms were kind of like chicken winged out, bent at the elbow, resting on the chest. So it's a really bizarre thing to see. Now, someone was actually arrested. There was some social media or podcast or somebody was able to get photos from the crime scene a while back and leaked them, actually sent them to a certain podcast that also airs live. And these people thankfully sent the photos to authorities rather than aired them. This guy has since been charged with this, with leaking this information. Mm-hmm. So whatever, there's conflicting stuff about that. They were kind of wiped and they've been put back out there. So it's something that doesn't need to be out there for the families. It's horrible. It's very, very horrible. But in saying that, it's a very, very bizarre sight as well. It shows you that someone took a lot of time whether it be all at one time, like I said, or if they left and came back. And I will tell you this, from the get-go, authorities have said, or it's been kind of verbalized or insinuated, that the girls were found with leaves and sticks covering them. And so when you hear that without seeing it, it sounds like someone was in a hurry to cover bodies. You know, we talk about that, like, two things, right? To literally conceal and camouflage just to have a longer time before someone finds them, or because there's some sort of a relation. There's some, albeit bizarre, but nurturing or caring aspect that, you know, a body is covered with a sheet or a blanket to kind of cover that face, to cover what you've done. But when you see this, neither one of those are the case. There is absolutely no way that I can imagine that anyone comes to the conclusion that these bodies were being concealed with these sticks. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So that's what investigators had said the whole time. And I say that because there's a reason. The way the sticks were lined up, they were in very particular patterns. So I am the probably first person when someone starts talking about a case and says, like, oh, it looks ritualistic in nature and sticks were, I usually laugh it off in the sense that usually that's not the case.
Yeah.
Usually there's an explanation, or there was going to be a fire to be had, or a kid was playing there, or the bones are scattered because animals got it, or whatever. In this case, I will say these sticks are very, like, manufactured. In fact, one has a very clean edge, as though it's been cut with either a very sharp knife or a saw. These were placed. These weren't strewn about in an effort to conceal. More on that in a moment, but just keep that in mind. That does give you a bit of an idea of what that crime scene was like. And again, y'all, that's new information. We didn't know any of this until just the past week or so with this trial. Okay. So Libby's phone was actually under Abby's body as well. Okay. So Libby had, while she was nude, her hands were covered in blood and her throat had been slit multiple times. For both girls, that was the manner of death. Abby's throat was also cut multiple times. Investigators said that they believe Abby's death actually took a bit longer. The thought is that Abby maybe had been either restrained or in some way incapacitated when her murder took place, because there was blood nowhere else on her other than on the wounds on her neck. Okay. So like I said, Libby had blood on her hands. It's because she was fighting back someone who was killing her. Abby did not. So Abby was very clean head to toe. Her clothing was clean. Again, it was very likely put back on after the fact. And her hands were clean. So keep that in mind. Richard Allen is 5 feet 4 inches, the man that was arrested and convicted of their murders. So this would be 2 girls to command, to commandeer down this hill, to either restrain or keep charge of while you're murdering one or trying to restrain the other. Like, these are things to think about. These were not little bitty girls. They weren't 5, 6 years old. They were, woman size. They were 13 and 14. So it has long standing been a theory that more than one murderer was involved. In fact, to this day, but on both prosecution and defense, they've said that potentially there were more than one. The last I read about it, even prior to this show, like just a few months ago, was that it was still considered kind of open in the sense that, yeah, he is definitely being tried for it, but potentially there are others. Now, one thing I will tell you about, without going on too much of a rabbit hole there, is that the property that butts up to Deer Creek, that's adjacent to that, belonged to an individual named Ron Logan. Now, at some point, which I'm actually going to go back on this statement, because I was going to say at some point, the Indiana State Police gathered a search warrant to search Ron Logan's property. They searched his home, his land. He had multiple outbuildings, multiple vehicles. Ron Logan is, I'm going to show you a picture here. Ron Logan died in January of 2022. Okay. This is him. You'll see he has an orange jumpsuit on. He did go to jail because he lied about a few things during all of this. He had a history of just some petty crimes that we knew of, nothing criminal in nature. The reason Ron Logan is talked about here is because he fabricated an alibi. In fact, he reached out to the person he used as his alibi to ensure that they would also be untruthful with police when questioned about his location at the time of the deaths. Okay. Now, we've talked about this before in the sense of people may lie about their alibi, and it's not because they committed that murder, right? It could be because they could have been involved in any other nefarious activity that they don't want to be found out about. So they can't say where they actually were, but maybe it wasn't at the murder. But, maybe it wasn't where they say they were either. So you can take that for what it's worth. In saying that to you, though, and this is where I'm going to walk back my words, but I was going to say probable cause was obtained to be able to search his property. And generally speaking, it's got to be pretty significant evidence. In fact, that's how I viewed it to be up until now. It's got to be pretty significant evidence to be able for a magistrate to sign off. Isn't that right? Wouldn't it be a magistrate?
Can be a
generally,
magistrate or a judge.
Okay, or a judge to sign off on saying, yep, you have probable cause. Now I'm going to issue this search warrant. Go do that. Because if not, guys, anybody could just start going in people's homes and searching for that's. So there's a reason there's such a judicial process with that. But knowing what we know, that.
Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Also, in a search warrant, they call it the four corners.
Right.
The search warrant has to state the information on there, the probable cause. It's not as if a detective or an investigator goes in front of a judge and gives us grand presentation and then they sign it. They read that document.
You got one shot.
Yeah, the judge does, or magistrate, either one. They don't know anything about the case. They read the affidavit and the search warrant, and they're like, "Yep," and they sign it. They can't ask you questions about it. Can't do any of that. So that's where the suppression hearings come in a lot of times with defense attorneys, because they want to tear apart a search warrant. So search warrants have to be solid. That's where you and I've been talking about the
one for Richard Allen.
Usually in that, people read. That's where the news outlets get a lot of information once those search warrants are returned and aren't sealed. They read them and go, "Oh, this gives all the information, the DNA, the photographs, all that." And
it does, because they have to.
Yeah.
But in saying that to you, this whole time, for all these years, I've thought, my goodness, Ron Logan's one to keep an eye on, because, whether or not his falsifying his alibi puts him at the murder, they had to have had something that caused them to get this search warrant executed. But now when we learn that for Richard Allen, they really didn't, there was not probable cause. So I don't know if they really had probable cause for Ron Logan, or if they were just able to obtain a search warrant. And I say that, I don't say that lightly when I'm talking about law enforcement, but we know, it's kind of like I was saying to Brian a couple of days ago, we as the general public don't know negative information, meaning if information is being put out right now. So if we know that they have XYZ, if they had more, we would now know, because the trial has concluded. If there was more to know, they would want us to know that, because they would want to show that their conviction stands, that this guy is guilty. And we just don't have that information, because it's not out there, because it doesn't exist. So we have the actual probable cause affidavit, and it just simply does not have what one should have specifically enough to target Richard Allen, to go and actually, maybe the guy did it, but I'm saying that search warrant's bad.
Right. Well, also, search warrants get denied a lot. It's not uncommon for an investigator.
They can say no.
Yeah, investigator to go in front of a judge or magistrate, and they read it and go, good luck to you, but you don't have probable cause. And a lot of times they're nice enough, they will explain, you're close, but I can't sign this because I still,
I'm going to need XYZ.
Yeah, just meaning that I don't want listeners to think, oh, well, no one ever denies one. And also, judges and magistrates, for the most part, are not working in concert with the investigator.
Right.
They're doing their daily job, their thing, and then you show up and then give them the search warrant and then they sign it. It's not as if they're part of some team and everybody's working together.
Or they have,
like
reason
more knowledge about it. No, all they've got is that.
Just to reference, he was an older gentleman that lived on the property that like abuts the creek bed where the girls had been found. Okay. So right there adjacent to that part of the creek. His property was searched. He lied about his alibi. Which you can do, by the way. You can do that.
You can.
So anyway, he's gone now. He left this earth in 2022. So, but then he was never really looked at again, at least, by investigators with this. So once the Richard Allen charges were secured in October of 2022, that was kind of it, at least as far as we all know. And again, I've gotten you up to the trial. So the trial, like I said, just concluded, and the jury just came back with the verdict of guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder yesterday, Monday, November 11th. Now, Richard Allen has concluded until going to prison that he was innocent. I will remind you that he had an interview 4 days after the murders where he actually voluntarily spoke to police as a witness to say, hey, I was there, that location around that same time. I'll give you whatever I have. They cleared him. He went about his way. 5 years go by. As they rerun files, they find him, and literally one of the first questions was, do you have a gun? He said, yeah. They say, is it .40 caliber? He says, yes. And then they decide to go back and pull footage, and they see in grainy traffic cam video what appears to be something that, quote, resembles his car. No tag number, nothing. And you have a witness statement saying she saw a man on the bridge. Just because he was on a bridge doesn't mean he was the man that witness saw on the bridge with blood on them. Either way, that was what law enforcement used, the Indiana State Police used to get the probable cause to then search his residence, where they then did find that unspent bullet. Now, we're going to talk about that.
Where they found the pistol.
Excuse me. They did find the pistol. They also found a second unspent .40 caliber bullet in what they call a keepsake box. But I mean, it was just a bullet. Do you know how many bullets have been laying around the house? I mean, whatever. Yeah. It's a bullet. But yes, you're right. It's where they found the .40 caliber pistol that matched the bullet that was found between the two girls' bodies. Now, there has been a lot of fodder about this bullet and about the forensics revolving around it. That was you like that?
Yeah.
I do what I can.
Ratcheting. Ratchet.
That's in your neck of the woods.
No.
Here you go. Okay. So Indiana State Police Lab test indicated that markings on the bullet found at the scene near the girls' bodies matched the ejector, extractor, and breech markings of Richard Allen's 6 Sauer 226. But those conclusions were made only by comparing the unfired bullet to shell casings later fired from his pistol. So, just quick terms, they take the bullet that they found at the scene, again, live. It has never been fired. It had just been discharged, ejected from his gun, but not fired from his gun, okay? And then to test that, those markings to see if they match other bullets from his own gun barrel, right? Then they are going to say they take other bullets and fire the gun. Now, these bullets these are no longer live rounds. These have been fired through the gun in a different type of way, which we've talked about, that could form similar markings on the bullet, or it may not. All right. So when they did that, the defense firearm expert told jurors that comparing unfired bullets cycled through a pistol to a fired bullet from a pistol will create different tool markings and would skew a conclusive result, and called it comparing apples to oranges.
Okay.
But I want to be like, how hard is it to just do the same thing, right? But now, granted, I mean, I listened to another where this FBI special agent, a retired woman, was talking about it, and that, and she followed this case closely, and she was talking about obviously the money that it takes to hire all these multiple experts, and the hours it would take to go out and shooting and all, gathering all the stuff that it takes to bring as actual evidence on stand, and those things just weren't done, and so, like I said, the firearm expert for the defense at least said that this would be an inconclusive finding. You're comparing apples to oranges. The unspent bullet compared to a fired one. Yes.
The only thing I would say, and I'm curious, I would want to know why the markings would be different when the pistol is fired and extracted and ejected.
I will find you the expert's phone number.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, because I would just want to know that, especially if I was a juror.
Yeah.
Because if you tell me that, my first thought is, why would it be any different? Yeah. But also, like, if you tell me that rounds that are being extracted from the SIG 226 are going to match up to just that SIG 226, if I were a defense attorney, I'd find 6 other models 226, and I would extract rounds, and then I would want to see if they actually matched up.
Well, because not only is that apples to oranges per that expert on firearms, I think that my question would be, okay, then what's a more distinctive comparison? Meaning, is when we talk about the snowflake or the fingerprint, like it's going to be individual to that specific firearm. Would that be once it's fired? So is this going to be more likely to yield the same results if it's unspent with another gun of the same model?
That's what I'm saying. It's like,
but when you fire it, that's what makes it individual to that firearm, one right there, but maybe not if it's okay.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying. Like, I don't know. I think get a little muddy.
Well, and this is a very, very big deal because that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what they have. That was the prosecution's entire case is built off of this unspent bullet that did not have his fingerprints on it, did not have. So if you're saying that it was specific to only his gun in his home, but then you've got a differing expert saying, actually, no, like that's going to be inconclusive. Then again, I'm not proclaiming this man's guilt or innocence, but we talk about guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And it feels like the reasonable doubt consistently grows in this case. Or at least feels like the prosecution didn't have what is needed to fully.
Yeah, I think the ballistics, I'm just saying right off the top of my head, they could have just been thorough with it. Because it sounds like that's what the defense just argued was, well, you compared it to this, but you didn't compare it to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that was the deal with the bullet. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm not. So Libby's video captured a grainy image of a man. Okay, so I've given you the case, okay, and I've given you up to the trial. So now we're going to be talking a little bit about, like I said, what prosecution brought to the table, how the defense countered it, the ultimate conviction, and what that looks like, and maybe a couple of other theories. So this is a little bit different. We usually cover unsolved, which this case had been for so long. Thank goodness it's looking like it's no longer unsolved. But let's hope that that's actually the case, because we usually weren't going to have theories to work with immediately following a conviction. But here we are. So Libby's video did capture that grainy image of the man who ordered the girls to go, quote, down the hill. Okay. It would be that guy. Indiana State Police enhanced the video, but the enhancement did not really improve the quality of the image. So what you see there is about as good as it gets. So you can tell that Bridge Guy's wearing light blue jeans, this blue jacket. One witness testified that she saw a man she believed to be Bridge Guy covered in mud and blood, like I mentioned a moment ago, and wearing a tan jacket. That's okay. Witnesses can get some colors mixed up or whatever. That's fine. But witnesses did testify that they believe Bridge Guy to be about 6 feet tall, young, fit, and with poofy hair. Okay. This, if you're just now watching, is the original sketch that was drawn the same month the girls were killed from witness testimony that said that the guy looked to be around 20 years old. He had curly hair, which I would consider this, quote, poofy hair, which is what the witness said, and 6 feet tall. Again, let me remind you that Richard Allen is 5 feet 4 inches tall.
Mm-hmm.
Also, remember that the guy on this film that looks like that could be Richard Allen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that he's the one.
That's what I was going to say. Is the guy on the bridge? He could just be a witness, correct? He could just be a person in the area.
The reason this gets hairy is because, but then you do hear in this video, I guess as I'm saying that out loud, the guy say down the hill.
Okay, maybe that's where I was confused.
Guys
so that
down the
still
hill.
shot is from one continuous
That's
video.
from the video. That's from
okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Which is another reason I think that it's so blurry, because they just took that shot from the video.
Okay,
and couldn't really increase it in clarity. But so listen to this, though. When they talk about, when the witness does say that the bridge guy could be as tall as 6 feet tall, the Indiana State Police Lieutenant Jerry Holman testified that it would cost $10,000 to do an accurate height analysis of bridge guy from the video, but they chose to put their resources elsewhere, according to testimony. Defense made a pretty big issue of this in closing arguments, as I would say. So it's a man's life, and we're looking at 10 grand, right? So, oh, wow, that hurts.
I'm not going to go on a different conversation, but when you're doing investigations like this, and people can argue with me if they want to, you pull the resources, you find the money, and you do that if it is necessary. Now, if you tell me that's not necessary in the case,
right?
Because the loblolly pine there to the left just happens to be 6 foot, and we measured it, and he's
exactly
6 inches. Okay, then I'm cool with that. But we don't. I mean, just from that photo, or maybe even from that video, you don't really have a reference to be able to say the door frame, anything like that we do sometimes where we can.
I know.
Yeah,
no, especially open air on that bridge. Yeah,
and sure. I'm not sharpshooting him. I'm just saying I do not like to hear people say, "Well, we just put money elsewhere." If that was necessary, if it wasn't necessary, then just say it wasn't necessary.
Right. So I will tell you, is going to, once Richard Allen is in prison awaiting trial, so his pre-trial time, they put him again in maximum security. He pretty quickly started losing weight, which is pretty normal. I would too. It would terrify me. But he also started behaving pretty erratically. There are multiple incriminating statements that he made himself in jail phone calls to his wife and to his mother. Okay. So hear me out on this before you say, "Oh, Andrea, you're crazy," because he's saying he did it. So evidently starting in April of 2023. So that means he would have been there for around 5 or 6 months. Okay. He allegedly made 61 incriminating statements, either verbally or in writing, according to reports. Hear me out fully, please. Prosecutors played at least 7 of these recorded phone conversations during April, in which he allegedly confessed to the jury. Okay. So on April 3rd of 2023, he calls his wife and says, "I did it. I killed Abby. I think I killed Abby and Libby." She said, "You're not feeling well. There's something wrong. Why would you say that?" She thought that the guards were messing with him. She thought some medication might be off. And he says, "Because maybe I did it. I think I did it." Okay. So at the time of the prison confessions, Allen was what they're considering now to be psychotic, according to both state and defense witnesses. So this is not just the prosecution side saying this. The defense side saying this. A person in that state of mind is likely to make incriminating statements if, in his mind, he's been persuaded to believe of his involvement. Allen's confessions during his psychotic periods to his wife and mother often included the phrases "I think" or "I believe" as caveats to his admission to killing Abby and Libby. Psychiatrists testified for both the state and the defense that a person in psychosis is prone to make statements based on a belief in their addled mind. 2 psychiatrists, one is a state witness, all right, and one is defense, as well as a neuropsychologist, testified that Allen was not faking his psychosis. They're saying this after Dr. Monica Walla's testimony, okay? So she believed he was feigning much of his behavior to manipulate prison guards, and she said maybe his motive is to call his wife more. Well, if his motive is to call his wife more, why is he calling her and telling her he did it, right?
Yeah.
So Again, though, a state witness and a defense expert psychiatrist and a neuropsychologist testified that he was in fact not faking his psychosis. Furthermore, that Dr. Walla that I was just telling you about, she was the prison psychiatrist that he spoke to often. Evidently, she was a psychologist. She treated Richard Allen at Westville Prison. So evidently, she was a true crime fan, and she'd been following the case of Libby and Abby for a very long time. She was eventually actually removed from her treatment of Richard Allen and the Westville Prison after it was learned that she used Indiana Department of Correction files to learn more about the case.
Okay.
And evidently some of his alleged confessions were made to her. So she was kind of hyperfixed on the case. She's also treating him. And then she's using confidential documentation to learn, or, files to learn more about the case. She also noted at some point in April that he killed them. The attack was probably sexual. He also, though, said things like, he said he raped them. Then he said he couldn't remember if he raped him. One thing I will tell you that I think I neglected to mention earlier, even though Libby was nude and Abby's clothes had been removed and put back on her, there was no sign of sexual abuse of the girls. Okay. So at one point when he finally confessed, meaning after he was like in prison, he tells the police that, okay, yeah, I saw him and I was going to rape them, but I got spooked by a Jeep that drove by, so I decided to kill them. This is after he started having what they considered to be psychotic episodes. This also doesn't align, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but that does not align with someone who got spooked because he was going to rape.
Yeah.
But now he's going to spend hours with these bodies.
Yeah.
Or, in the process of killing, manipulating, posing.
Also, phrases like, I think I did. I probably did. You don't have.
Not super solid. Well, what you also don't have is him saying, yeah, Libby was crying. I had to tie Abby up because I couldn't control them both. She started to run away, but I grabbed her ankle. Like we have no actual story.
Yeah.
Like all he will say is maybe I think I did it, but there's no actual story of what he did. He's not given any of that.
Yeah, best question you could ask. I mean, not that his wife would, maybe she would, but if a person just followed and said, "Why do you think you did it?" Because most people will say, "I either did it."
Well,
or
I think his mom, one of them had said, like, "Why are you saying this?"
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not feeling well. There's something wrong. Why would you say that?
Yeah.
But he would never really give a. I think the response to one of those questions was because I think I did. But it was also never like again, no details on what he didn't sit down with cops and write a statement.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, like we were talking about earlier, I'm not saying he's innocent. I just, when you have a psychosis, if everybody's agreeing that he's having episodes, then whatever he's saying, if it's not cut and dry like that, or if he doesn't say, whatever, I did a very specific thing with the stick, or I did whatever.
He followed no linear, like there's no linear timeline. There was no bullet points. There was no detail in what he evidently did or is confessing to. So 2 psychiatrists testified that Allen was still psychotic and receiving antipsychotic medicine in the months in which he confessed. Let me tell you a little bit about that. Richard Allen had a history of depression and anxiety. I mean, who amongst us, right? We talked about that earlier. I think 70% of this nation seems to be diagnosed with that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But he's never been diagnosed with any psychotic behavior. You don't all of a sudden develop psychoses at 57 years old. I'm not saying things can't drive you to have a break and be crazy, but he's not going to now develop schizophrenia, right? So it's not that he's been battling mental health issues and let's say his wife says he's not taking medication and he's doing all these crazy things, so you just can't believe what he says. That's not true. He had been in the National Guard. He went to work at Walmart for 10 years. He had a heart attack at 37 years old. Then he goes to work at that local CVS for 13 years until his arrest. He didn't have a job where he was gone for long periods of time. If he's cutting up girls and staging bodies, he's going to have to be away from home for a while. If he did that, it's probably not the first time he's ever done it. Definitely wouldn't be the last, but he doesn't have a job to where he's ever away from home for extended period of times to be doing these things. He lived in a rural town. So let's say he lived in a highly populated city. Maybe he's getting away with doing these kinds of things for a little bit of time, but he's not. He's somewhere rural. People start
Mhm.
dropping off the map, it's going to be noticed. Okay. So these are just things to consider. So when you talk about this psychosis he was having in prison, why wasn't he ever having that before? Well, evidently, once he got there, he started to become, quote, agitated. I'm going to be extremely agitated if I go to prison. I can promise you that. It's one of my unfounded fears that I will be in prison one day, and it terrifies me. So
I mean, all people, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So in saying that, though, I think agitation is one thing, right? But they started giving him injections of what's called haloperidol. It's also known as Haldol. I've given this drug multiple times myself. It's a fantastic drug if someone is combative and in a psychosis state. He, however, did not have a history of this. So when you are not psychotic and you start receiving mass doses of this quite often throughout your stay, it can actually mimic symptoms of psychosis. So it's as though the medication is exacerbating the thing you're trying to treat, right? So they start talking about that he was masturbating in front of other inmates. There is video footage of him actually eating his own feces, like full on psychotic break. These are the times when the man is saying things like, I think I did it. I think I killed them.
Yeah.
The man who was interviewed in 2017 and then again in 2022 willingly, who was like, yeah, here's my phone, like do whatever. And he starts saying, well, hey, I don't know these girls. Like, wait, are you starting to implicate me in this? I didn't do this. What? No, I was just there at the park. You guys said for witnesses to come forward. Very different man than the one that's making these phone calls and saying these weird things.
And a big problem with the false confession, or even take the psychosis aside, when they started talking to him and he was cooperating, this is why we were talking earlier. I said I don't like lying in an interview. I don't once especially to someone who is not a habitual criminal or has been in and out of prison and kind of works those angles. If they all of a sudden think, well, hold on, like you're trying to pin this on me, you're trying to frame me like in a movie,
right?
Then they're not going to trust anything that you do or say or anything like that.
And why would you? Like.
Yeah, I forgot my point. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I completely forgot it.
Well, just right. That. Like, I think that the pattern was that he was not exhibiting any psychotic behavior, and he was very linear with the timeline, very detail oriented with his day, with his alibi, with all these things, until he gets into prison, potentially if he's innocent, and starts receiving this antipsychotic medication and starts losing his ever-loving mind. So you're saying about like lying in a confession, like all of these things, I think.
Yeah, the everything. Also, I wonder if anybody ever showed a family member or a friend of his, or even him. I don't know that they had the information when they were talking to him, or maybe it was too early in the investigation. But when you have someone on video and you show them that, or you show them the still shot from security camera, and you just go, 9 times out of 10, they recognize themselves, and then they realize, oh, I'm on video.
Yeah, exactly.
But that I'm curious if other people see that and go, that's actually that. There's no way that's him.
Yeah.
Like loved ones or friends.
Yeah. Well, so let's start to wrap up this crazy part of this case. I just didn't think that once a conviction occurred, we'd be talking like my brain has been spiraling.
Yeah.
Over this. So let me read to you guys. Actually, let me put Silly in the chat just said deny the polygraph. We've got to have a shirt that says deny the polygraph. I say it every time. Ugh.
Well, the thing too, real quickly, is when people do cooperate and they're not guilty, they usually can clear their name pretty quickly.
I know. You always have to remind them.
I know, and I'm not saying take a polygraph because I've never used them in an investigation. But people can usually clear themselves when they cooperate. The drawback is when they do start lying, like the other dude did. And it complicates everything. Sorry,
so no, you're fine. So I just put a picture up if you're watching of Abby and Libby. That's Abby on the left. Um, So let me read to you a couple of things. So that's kind of the idea of Richard Allen. So you can kind of get an idea, but of what you think based on the things we said. The smoking gun for the defense was the bullet that we found out from an expert was inconclusive results to pair it with his gun. Okay, the bullet that was found at the scene, and then his jailhouse, his prison confessions after he had been arrested for the murder. So it's like he was already arrested. He makes these prison confessions on an antipsychotic medication that he had never taken before, exhibiting behavior he'd never exhibited before. And the bullet was inconclusive. That was it, guys. That was the prosecution's case. I listened to a bunch of breakdowns from different experts. So like I said, that FBI field officer, some other investigators, detectives, some lawyers, all sorts of different types of people who would kind of armchair quarterback the day as soon as the court session closed for the day, and then as the jury was deliberating. And listen, every one of them are saying the same thing. They're like, I don't know, maybe he did, but I don't see a case here. I'm not sure what the jury's going to have to work with here. So the reasonable doubt is big with this one. So let me read to you, though, the biggest thing, what's been going on lately is the idea of, if I can find what it is that I'm looking for, the idea of this thing called Odinism. Okay. So Odinism is actually like a Norse, it can be deemed a religion. It can be deemed like a cult. But unfortunately, what's happened is like it has been taken over, like kind of hijacked here and then into prisons with like white supremacist groups taking it over and kind of saying that they're a part of this Odin cult. Now, I bring this to you because the defense wanted to use this as Richard Allen's defense, that actually what had happened was that the girls were positioned as though like someone from this cult had actually done this in a ritualistic way, and he has no ties to this type of behavior or this cult. Hear me out on this one. So it was looked at as preposterous. And the first time I heard it, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. You guys are grasping at straws. Like, please tell me you're not saying that somebody came in here, killed these girls, and maneuvered their bodies to be such to look like this cult, had done this thing. Let's take a little look. I'm just going to give you this visual. So on the left, we have a fairly accurate diagram. It's a little bit different, but fairly accurate diagram of Abby and Libby and their positions upon being found after their death. It's as I described earlier, with the way their arms are positioned and the way their orientation of their bodies. Libby is at the base of a tree and Abby is diagonal off of her. To the right in this photo are these cards that are from this Odin, what would you call a religion, a cult, whatever.
I don't know, like a subculture almost.
Yeah. So one is called the Magician and the other one is called the Hanged Man. There's multiple variations on these illustrations, but the Hanged Man one is what those who believe this cult type thing was involved in this. This isn't going to be as far-fetched as it sounds right now, so give me 30 seconds and you're going to find out why. But the Hanged Man, it's illustrating a man hanging by his ankle from a tree, head down toward the ground, but his leg is extended. One of his legs is extended. The other leg is bent at a 90-degree angle at the knee and tucked under that straight leg. And his arms are bent at the elbows. And this illustration doesn't show it, but most common illustrations of it show that he has been actually slit at the throat. This would be almost identical to the way Abby's body was found. Conversely, we have the card that shows what's called the Magician. This is someone with one arm extended straight over their head, the other arm straight down by their side, and their legs straight. This picture renders this person to have what looks like an infinity symbol over their head on the card. In reality, or on other cards, it'll sometimes have what looks like horns, wooden horns on the person that's illustrated. And at the real life crime scene, Libby is lying almost identical to what this picture looks like. And she had actually had wooden sticks that were placed at her head to appear to be horn-like in nature. Okay, so that is absolutely worth taking a look at. And let me read you this. I'm going to read from this website, meaww.com, and we're going to talk about a guy named Johnny Messer. Okay, so when I said that this isn't necessarily as far-fetched as it may sound, there's a guy who lived in Delphi named Johnny Messer, and he evidently was named as a member of the Odinism cult, filed by the Richard Allen's defense attorneys. Okay, so very long story short, they made a 136-page memorandum on what they consider to be evidence that Abby and Libby were killed in ritualistic fashion by members of this Odinist cult. They filed another motion, and Judge Gull, the female judge that was presiding over Richard Allen's case, at every turn said that they did not have what was admissible to use in the case for the Odinism to be a defense. Mm-hmm. Briefly, what say you on that?
I say that Odinism, they're not based in killing and harming children in this way.
Right.
So, but the symbolisms and like we were talking about, the actual like posing of the body and stuff does seem similar to that, which would lead to potentially a killer having those symbols, having that information, but not necessarily doing it because of that movement or that subculture kind of thing. Right.
So also, I think important to remember is that this is, let me see here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to pull up some stuff for you. Yeah, well, I don't have it on here. I'll put it on, I'll put this on Instagram. Keep in mind as well, this is a bastardization of the original like Norse thing, right? So like people have taken it and kind of done, while it doesn't typically involve the killing of children, people have taken it to kind of mold it to do what they want to do with it. So I don't think it's far-fetched to think that something like that could potentially happen. So keep an eye on this picture if you're taking a look here. We got these guys all wearing their cute little matching shirts they got on Etsy, and they all claim to be in this Odinist cult. So again, it's kind of like the white supremacist version of this old Norse thing, right? So the defense tried to use it. The judge said, absolutely not. You can't use that as a defense. I say, let them use it. I mean, geez, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work for them, right? But either way, they didn't get to use it. But I want you to hear about it because the jury sure didn't get to hear about it. So this individual named Johnny Messer, so he's from Rushville, Indiana, and he was one of 5 men that were named in a court filing by Richard Allen's lawyers claiming that Abby and Libby were ritualistically sacrificed. So evidently, he maintains his innocence. I mean, I think they talked to his aunt who said he was a quite nice young man. But we're going to move along and talk to some other people that knew him and talk a little bit about that filing that Richard Allen's lawyers tried to give over to the judge. So they say that the Odinism cult is who killed them or members of it. And evidently one is from Delphi and one is from the Rushville area in southeastern Indiana. They claim that their client, Richard Allen, was innocent and that the members linked to the crime was recklessly ignored by authorities. So what say you, Night Shift listeners? You tell me what you think. So evidently there was a guy named Brad Holder. He was a known Odinist in the area, and his son was dating Abby at the time of her death. Evidently, this Brad Holder guy posted, and I went back and found these, and I thought I downloaded them. I will put them on Instagram. But he posted multiple pictures of that hanging man that I just showed you. Multiple pictures. Like he painted it in oil. He posted pictures of little wood chips that he had like burned carvings into, and the Facebook post was titled "Finally Got My Runes Done." He had a knife that he had just finished like making, and he said, "Finally got it ready." He had pictures of a yard that had sticks lying in it. The sticks in his photos in the yard are exactly the same as the positioning of the sticks on the girls' bodies.
Okay.
All of these things were taking place not long after their murders, but long before the public knew anything about that crime scene. We didn't know anything about that until just recently. Okay. And he posted this stuff that they can over. Okay. Again, this Brad Holder was a known Odinist in the area, and his son was dating one of our victims, Abby. Okay. Evidently, he was a recruiter. That Holder guy was a recruiter for what's called the Vinlander group. Brian and I talked about it a little bit. You know, his affinity for gangs.
Yeah.
It doesn't really
Vinlander
quite.
Social Club. What you got up there?
Okay, this would be one of those, right? I think with the white supremacists.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying earlier, and I think you said it too, where people kind of take symbols, and Odinism is huge in that movement. But,
so the Vinlander Social Group evidently is who these guys that you've got on that picture are saying that they represent. So they will say that you can kind of interchange the word Vinlander and Odinism, at least current day, with the way people treat it. So evidently, check this out. This Johnny Messer guy that I'm telling you about evidently was in the Delphi area with his Vinlander buddies on or around Valentine's Day 2017, the day the girls were found dead. Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Taylor Hornaday, told police that Johnny Messer and Patrick Westfall were like brothers. There's a reason you're hearing these names. She also told police that she had allowed Johnny to borrow her car on or around Valentine's Day in 2017, and that Johnny drove her car to Delphi to hang with his Vinlander friends. Evidently, when Johnny returned, and this is all in the affidavit, this is all in this 136-page document that defense attorneys were trying to hand over to the judge to be able to use this stuff as evidence in the trial for the defense. And they weren't allowed to. So again, the jury didn't hear any of this. So, but they deemed this what's the word I'm looking for? Solid enough, legitimate enough to want to use it as their client's defense. So evidently this ex-girlfriend of Johnny Messer says that when he brings her car back to her, evidently he refused to talk to her, but she was asking him why there was blood that was dried to the side of the car. She said that it took several car washes to finally remove the blood. He said that he had nothing to do with any of this. He doesn't know what she's talking about. She says, though, that he and that Brad Holder are two of the most violent people that she's ever known. She said that, in her opinion, they could be fully capable of being involved in something like this. She stated that they did go by a creed of blood in, blood out. And this would mean the social acceptance into their little circles.
Okay.
So while ritualistic killing is not generally a part of Odinism or this Vinlander mess, whatever that is, they're making it their own. Okay. So evidently this information was all relayed to Liggett, who was the lead on the investigation, and to the Unified Command Team. But evidently no one knew what to do with it. They say that Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend had been listening to and recording his actual phone calls, and police secured the phone, listened to 3 phone calls involving Johnny Messer, and in 2 of these phone calls, he was, quote, offering money. And this is per police. Like, they heard these calls, offering money to other people to find someone so they can be, quote, injured or killed. This was part of their blood in, blood out. So evidently the 3rd call involves Johnny Messer bragging about holding a subject hostage and shooting them at his house. Evidently, though, nothing happened of this. This went nowhere. So evidently no search warrant was issued for Johnny Messer. They did not interrogate Johnny Messer and these other guys, it was pretty much like a blind eye was turned. And this is, again, per Richard Allen's defense attorneys, but we know that these tapes came forward, and this wasn't just some scorned ex-girlfriend saying all these crazy things. They had proof. They had document of this stuff. So they want to say that Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, and potentially Patrick Westfall would have been involved in these crimes. So when they talk about their bodies, they say that excuse me, where did my little thing go? Oh, goodness. Sorry, I'm trying to find my little spot wherever I was. There had been, remember when I told you that there was thoughts, and continue to have been thoughts, that potentially multiple people were involved in this. It wasn't just the one killer. Well, we know that Abby, they say, was potentially restrained or unconscious when she was killed because she had no blood anywhere other than on her neck. And that's when I got to talking to Brian about it. I've not yet seen the autopsy results, but I've not read anything about ligature marks on her wrist, a wound to the head, to render her, let's say, unconscious, anything to indicate suffocation. And so that's where people go back to say that potentially if these guys, if there were 2 or 3 of them involved in this kind of thing, then easily one could be restraining her while the other was doing what he was doing. So then we have, I want you to hear this, guys, and I will be letting you go soon, but it's so important to hear this stuff. So when you look at the 136-page court document that was released, here it is. So evidently, when Richard was arrested and charged with the murders in October of 22, like I said, at first he said he had nothing to do with it until he went a little crazy. So they say that they have investigators consulted that were from a Purdue professor, like this, per the school, this expert in this stuff, that said possibly Odinism signatures were left at the scene. Then everything gets quiet for a while. And then we have the former Rushville Assistant Police Chief, Todd Click, who has since retired, who wrote a letter to the prosecutor on the case. He said that he was concerned that the information in the Richard Allen affidavit was not as compelling as the info that he had uncovered in his investigation pre-retirement. He attached with his letter a statement that said the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the BAU, of the FBI determined that the individual or individuals responsible for the homicide were involved in Nordic beliefs. The document says that Richard Allen had no connection to any pagan cults, and there is no forensic evidence, including DNA evidence or technological evidence, linking him to the crime scene. Keep in mind that they confiscated every one of his phones, laptops, computers. There was no pornography looked at, definitely no child anything like that looked at. There was no violence. In fact, the prosecutors went so far as to say that his Netflix search history was to view horror movies, and that would tend toward his proclivity to violence, which I think is an embarrassment.
Yeah, that's
to say out loud.
Yeah.
So evidently, it's alleged that Odinists are employed as correction officers for the Indiana Department of Corrections at the Westville Correctional Facility, where Richard is currently incarcerated. The local to Delphi named Brad Holder, he was on radar, I guess, a long time ago. And evidently, days and weeks after the murders, he posted several social media images that mimicked what was found at the crime scene. The imagery at that time had never been made public, so no one knows exactly how he knew what was going on. His son, Logan, had been dating Abby. That's the one I mentioned earlier. And evidently, Brad was cleared as a suspect 1 month after the murders. He continued to post disturbing images on social media. One appears to be 2 dead women on the ground in a forest, but both women had tree branches and sticks on their bodies, and one woman had her arm above her head, which is exactly how Libby was found. You can see this. I can't post it just yet. I will later, but this is his own artwork. He painted this photo of that hanging, the one that's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. These are the runes that he made for himself at his home and the knife that he finished, okay? So these are the sticks outside that he's been placing, and they look like what was laid on top of the girls. So evidently there were multiple other suspects that were in this Odinist group, okay? And I'm not going to bore you with some of those details, but it is wild. So evidently, go back to that Johnny Messer that I just told you about a moment ago. Evidently, he was a recruiter for the Odinites. And that's when we got to talking about his ex-girlfriend, Taylor Hornaday, and all the things that she said about the dried blood and all of that. So evidently, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones are the correctional officers that are involved in the Odinist stuff, the rituals. Evidently, they both wear patches that say "In Odin We Trust" on their actual uniforms, and they have rune imagery on their social media. The rune would be like the sticks, right, that were left on the girls' bodies that had been said by investigators to have been left there to conceal their bodies. Mm-hmm. If you see these pictures, guys, don't. It's terrible. But if you see them, nothing about the children are covered. Meaning, like if you picture a body laying on the ground and you take 2 or 3 sticks and diagonally put it over an arm and a shoulder and another one on another part of the body, you could easily see their entire bodies, their faces. They weren't covered. These were clearly placed there a certain kind of way. Evidently, Libby's right arm was along her body. Like I told you, one tree branch was on her left shoulder, a large branch that extended past her body. 2 smaller branches formed a V where her legs joined her body near her genitals. And the last branch went across her body from right shoulder to left shoulder. There's more about that. It's just more detail on these sticks if you want to look at them like that or as runes. Abby had tree branches as well. She had branches to look like an asterisk kind of, and she had smaller sticks that were placed over her hair that looked like horns or antlers. And like I said before, some of the branches had been cut by an instrument. They were clean cut. Okay. So someone knew what they were doing with these beforehand. This indicates some pre-planning. So evidently there was a letter F painted in Libby's blood 4 feet from the tree base. I don't know. It's terrible. Richard, again, is only 5'4". Not that he couldn't do this to the 2 girls, but him to be solely responsible for getting control of both is a bit of a stretch. Get them both across this cold river. It was about 3.5 feet deep. And like I said before, if he was scared about being there or got spooked by this Jeep, evidently he would have had to have waited quite some time because Abby's death took quite a while per the medical examiner, and then positioned the girls. So I'm not going to keep on with that. I do think that the last thing I want to tell you is that obviously defense is seeking dismissal for the case altogether, which didn't happen, but now they're going to be looking at an appeal. I'm quite sure of it. So evidently, Brad Holder and Pat Westfall of Delphi were noted as connected to the murders back in 2017. Brad Holder's wife testified that he met with Abby Williams multiple times, and there were pictures on his phone of the girls with sticks arranged in Norse formations. This is this man's wife. In 2017, Delphi police used a DVR set to record interviews. Listen up, guys. Former police chief Mullins testified that he noticed that the DVR was set to continuously record months after recording Holder's interview, so the interview was lost. He also says the FBI never recorded Westfall's interview. The judge had initially said she'd take this evidence under advisement, which evidently she did, and said, nope, we're not going to be using it. And that's about that in terms of that Odinist stuff and in terms of what the judge got and what she denied to use. I will tell you this last little tidbit here if we still have anybody hanging on with us. My stomach's a growling. Mm-hmm. Check it out, though. So in the video, you hear Abby say, is he right here? Don't leave me up here. And Libby says, this is the path. That's a gun. There's no path here. And a male voice then says, guys. And one of the girls reply, hi. The man then says, down the hill. So this Liggett, he was the lead investigator at the time. Let me take these dudes' picture. I'm tired of seeing them. He says that he talked about speaking with Richard Allen in October of 2022, and that Allen changed his timeline to say he was on the trails from noon to 1:30. Again, that was like a 30-minute time difference 5 years later. And this investigator said that he considered that very wishy-washy and wishy-washy about where he parked. We've already discussed that. We don't have to go back over it, but that's generally speaking not going to be wishy-washy. When he was asked about the gun, he said he found it there at Allen's home. So when that Liggett was cross-examined, he pointed out, or the attorneys for Richard Allen pointed out, that Liggett was running for sheriff in October of 2022 when Richard Allen was arrested.
It's the pros and cons for having an elected police leader. Meaning, in my head, I just thought of, but that's where the pressure comes in. Like, we got to solve this.
I just think that
Duke Lacrosse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just think that, look, this dude might have done it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
With the stuff that the jury didn't hear, though, with this other stuff, and that's why I say, like, generally speaking, I'm going to laugh off the idea of, like, a ritualistic, only because it's not that common. Not that it can't happen. It's not that common. Yeah. But when you look at these dummies up here throwing these signs and acting cool, but then we hear what we hear and that they say that they are a part of this thing. So get this. So they take FBI investigators and local police guys, and they get 3 of them together to form this task force that actually they were kind of experts in Odinism and these types of cults and the white supremacy gangs and all these kinds of things. And they got on the case and they immediately started looking into it as though it was actually initially an Odin type murder. But one was recused from the case. Another one, a couple of years later, unfortunately was killed right outside of the FBI building, was gunned down by an actual corrections officer. Mm-hmm. So I'm not one to just say, cover-ups and corruption and rituals, oh my, but like there's just a lot of weird stuff. I think at the very least, 2 things are true. There was not probable cause for a search warrant to even start any of this. Mm-hmm. And I also think that the reasonable doubt is so large here that I think that personally, again, without knowing whether or not he did it, I'm not sure I could convict if I was on that jury based off of the case that we've had presented.
Yeah, it seems to be lacking a lot. I mean, to say the least. So, I don't know. Like we've said in the past, people can be guilty, but then the case itself, you just don't have that level of evidence for murder.
Yep. Whew. Done. I'm done. I'm tired and I'm done and my throat's dry.
I know. Mine is too.
Oh, goodness. Well, y'all, whoever's still here, I think Bosco just went to bed. Night, Bosco. Hey, silly. Whoever's still here, thank you. I did not intend this to be 2 hours long, but here we are. Here we are. Yeah. But we will be back with our regular scheduled program next week.
Yes.
I guess we are this week. We weren't last week.
Yeah.
Man, what a few days it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything while I try to put this picture on here?
Yeah. Just that merchandise is slowly getting checked and approved. And that's illicit apparel daily threads.
Mm-hmm. Check it out, y'all.
That have been cool enough to sponsor the show. And at some point, we'll figure out how to be more formal about it. But they are starting to carry night shift merchandise, disruptors merchandise. And then they've got their own stuff that's some of it's just funny, some of it's more serious.
Yeah, they've got just like kind of
cool stuff.
Very general. Yeah, some niche stuff, but they've got, I think a lot of it's just funny. But yeah, like you said, they carry some night shift stuff and disruptor stuff, which is super cool.
Yes.
That's been a lot of fun. Heather Vick, your shirt should be on the way. I actually ordered that one for her because she won it. It was a Halloween costume. Silly got one.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
excuse me. Faulkner got one that she
Uh-huh.
really, really liked. So yeah, check them out. It's really cool stuff. Hey, Davey. Hey, Falk. We got quiet listeners who are
Yes.
hanging out there.
Yeah, there was some chatter earlier.
Oh, good.
Then they got engrossed in the episode. And
Oh, good.
Calm down a little bit.
Yeah, it's weird, y'all. It's a weird
Mhm.
case. Y'all tell me right now before we get off. Somebody put in the chats what you think based off of what you heard. Do you think that there was enough there to convict him? That would be Richard Allen.
Yeah.
I think I've made my opinion known.
And obviously, you never want the wrong person charged. And if they are wrong, then obviously that's a travesty. Also, that person's not going to stop. We know that. I mean, it sounds like me being a kind of a dumbass, but
no,
on
and
that
I think
level,
that's the thing too. Like,
selection.
If we've got one guy's wife saying, "Yeah, he's a part of this cult. Yeah, he's had multiple encounters with Abby." Yeah, there was a weird picture on his phone of like two girls
Right.
lying in a field with sticks on them. And then we've got a whole different guy this guy's affiliated with, a whole different individual whose ex-girlfriend is saying, yeah, he borrowed my car that day and went to Delphi to hang out with his Vinlander Social Club friends. And when he brought it back to me, it had blood on it, but he wouldn't talk to me about it. And I had to keep taking it to the car wash to get the blood off. Like,
yeah.
And these calls were recorded by police. So this wasn't even just, again, this wasn't hearsay based off of these women, which is, I think, more than hearsay. But we have phone recordings of Johnny Messer's phone, and then police interviewed Brad Holder, but they accidentally lost it because they continued to record over that tape.
Yeah.
But then we have some correctional officers involved in Odism as well. So we have some conflicts of interest here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's so weird. Oh gosh, my pants are.
And we talked about it earlier, but
What?
Yeah, that wasn't just a drive-by kind of thing, So, without rehashing everything,
yeah,
looking at who seemed to receive the majority of the violence in that incident, and then the connections that they may have to anyone that would know Odinism or symbols similar to that. Like when people start talking about runes, and then they start talking about pagan symbols and then all this other stuff. That's kind of the thing to me is like, I'm not saying like Odinism is white supremacy. White supremacist groups adopt Odinism stuff. White supremacist groups aren't going around killing people ritualistically like that. But someone with that background of Odinism, it seems to be that on the crime scene. Or it's just a huge coincidence.
Here's another rendering of the hanging man. Again, here's the picture that shows Abby on the left. Oh, this is Johnny Messer, by the way. You think he could be this guy? Or I don't know. It's just we have a group of people who police somewhat talked to, somewhat didn't. Blood, a picture of two girls, sticks, a guy posting on Facebook, sticks in certain positions. That's how the sticks were found on the girls' bodies. No one knew what the crime scene looked like. He's posting paintings that he's drawing of bodies in that position.
Yeah.
He did not yet know what the crime scene looked like because the public didn't. But then you've got one singular 5'4" Richard Allen who worked at the local CVS and has absolutely zero ties for his family, friends, internet searches. Not only, guys, keep in mind, when I say there was no DNA, there was no DNA except early on, police said that the DNA of a male that clearly didn't match Abby or Libby and did not match Richard Allen was found on one of the bodies. We don't know what kind of DNA it was, but we have since learned when it was brought up at trial that they, quote, no longer have that DNA. Now, when one of those, I think it was the guy that starts PW are his initials. When he was questioned, when the girls were first found dead, he said to two different people, we have two different people coming forward to say that Patrick Westfall, that's his name, had said, oh, excuse me, he told it to a woman, but he also said it to one of the cops that if they found he told the cop if they found his spit, he could explain it. And separately, he told a friend of his, a woman, that he told her what had happened. They'd killed these girls, and that if you find spit, I can just explain it when they questioned him. And then they said that we have a male DNA that does not match Richard Allen's found on one of the bodies. And now they say they don't have it. So, I mean, it just...
Yeah.
So, and in saying that, you don't have any of the girls' DNA on anything that Richard Allen has, at least that we know of years later when they brought him in. And Brian made a great point that, yeah, he's been washing that coat this whole time. Okay, sure. But this is an incredibly bloody crime. That crime scene was super duper bloody. Both girls' throats were cut, right? So they were moved. Libby was moved 20 feet from the place where she was murdered. They were potentially manipulated post-mortem multiple times. There are reports that sometimes early on investigators thought that maybe somebody came back 2 or 3 times to move them around. And now we have these sticks that were cut by a saw. So somebody had to have done that and come back. So in saying that, none of Richard Allen's DNA was found there. That's a lot of moving, a lot of maneuvering. He had a goatee at the time, facial hair, hair on his head, hair on his arms, what his own sweat, spit, whatever. No transfer, no touch, no hair follicle. Nothing was found of his there.
Did you say he had a beard?
He had kind of like a goatee, kind of scruff. But he doesn't look like this either.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. So the guy who didn't plan to go there to kill him, because per his own account, once they get him in prison, he says, some weird stuff about, I was gonna rape him but got spooked. But then this guy's prepared to perform a killing like this,
right?
And do these things and also not leave any of his own DNA. Doesn't make any sense to me.
No. Did you enjoy Halloween?
Yes.
Okay.
I did.
I did too.
I was trying to get
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I was trying to get a picture up here for the fine folks. Do you want to tell them about it? Is that what you're...
Oh, no. I was just saying. No, we are the reigning champs 2 years in a row.
It's true. Challenge me.
Challenge, yeah. What'd you say? Oh,
challenge. Yeah. I was making
Yeah. Of Halloween costumes. So last year it was Silence of the Lambs. I was Buffalo Bill. You were
the girl in the well.
The girl in the well. And this year, you were Freddie Mercury, and I was David Bowie.
It's true.
And we carried a speaker around that was playing Under Pressure, just in case people didn't quite make the connection.
Everybody knew.
Everybody knew.
Everybody said they actually felt like they saw Queen and David Bowie.
They loved it. And that was good. That was a lot of fun. You did an incredible job on my makeup, by the way.
I'm trying to get... Okay, I'll show it to y'all. I'm going to have to turn this down. You can keep talking if you'd like.
Yeah, I always like to talk. But, yes, it was a blast. We are getting back on schedule.
Yeah. Do you have any classes or anything like that coming up?
I do not, but I think what I'm going to do, I was actually texting with our buddy earlier, and I'm going to do maybe some classes in the spring, in-house, and may even do some for free in-house. We'll see how that goes. Maybe.
Do you want to explain?
Oh, it's got your phone.
I can't do that. Okay, ignore that.
You're on the camera. You're on the.
I know. Just ignore it. I was trying to upload. Forget it. Okay.
It's like that that meme, and it's Buffalo Bill looking in the well, like that picture up there of you.
Ah!
And it says,
What is that?
I told you that's what the camera was on the
I
whole
thought it
time.
was facing the other way.
No. So it's the perspective
I'm glad I'm
of
fully
the
dressed.
French fries in that bag in McDonald's takeout looking
That
up
could
at
be
you.
so bad. That could have been so bad.
That's what I was
Why
trying
is
to
it
tell
still
you.
up there?
I don't know.
Gosh.
I didn't even know what you did or how you did it.
Oh,
You worked some magic.
oh my gosh.
It looked like you were in class, like cheating on an exam or something.
Yeah,
like looking
I
down.
know. That's terrible.
I don't know.
All right. So you said you might do a couple of free classes.
Yeah, I'll and we can talk about it like next week. I just thought about it. I was like, let me reach out and see if that's even possible schedule wise.
Yeah.
So
would
I'll
that
probably,
be for law enforcement? Did you already say that part?
I'm sorry. It'll be law
crawling under the desk,
enforcement,
evidently.
and it would be gang encounters, and then one that's hives and habituals, which is basically disrupting areas of heavy crime, like repeat locations, or knowing patterns of behavior and that sort of thing for repeat offenders. And then, and all of that's used to reduce violence. And then also probably an investigator's course.
Ooh.
So on violent crimes, how to work your crime scenes, how to work your investigations, how to compile case jackets, how to present things in court, that stuff.
Can I take that class?
Yes, you can. And then I'll get back to doing some more virtual stuff as well. Like I've done in the past where you're doing virtual sessions and people log on using the exact same equipment we use here for the podcast. Then we can talk about all kinds of different topics.
Okay. I'm going to leave you guys with something that'll keep you up tonight. If it wasn't what we already did. So I think Brian just told you. Oh gosh, I'm not done with this. I'm glad this is done. Brian just told you that we were Freddie Mercury and David Bowie for Halloween.
Yeah. Champs.
All right.
It's full commitment, and that's what I love best about you.
It is. If you live anywhere near where we live and you're out and about one night, you may just see me in this hairy chest bodysuit because it's my favorite new piece of clothing. And I wore it to get tacos the other night, and he didn't know I had it on under my sweatshirt.
Oh, it was great. You look like you're about to go buy a Camaro or something right there.
Of course I am. About to go sing at Live Aid.
Pop the hood. Let me check out.
All
right.
Oh, my God. Okay, so I'm going to go on and get rid of
that.
all of that. Get it off. I can't get... Gosh, I'm so tired. It's done. Okay. We're done. Well, after that case, we need a little levity. But we'll be interested to hear what goes on. Again, Richard Allen is scheduled for a sentencing hearing on December 20th. I just keep this one in your back pocket. I think that I don't think there will be an appeal. There's always an appeal. This one, I think that they've actually got a solid chance. If they can prove that PC was not what was needed, that they had inadequate PC for that initial search, it's over anyway. Mm-hmm. And even so, I'm hoping that they can now even just get a different judge and at least have that evidence to be admissible on the OSHA get DNA profiles. Got none of it. So
Yeah, that's all I said. I mean, just the investigator side of that. And once you clear people, then you clear them. That's part of the investigation.
yeah,
But those like huge indicators of your crime scene, and then like we've talked about, and we're not going to rehash it, but motive and how things are done and why they're done usually lead you to the suspect. So
I can also tell you that if I was implicated in something as horrendous as that and put in prison, I'd be just as crazy as Richard Allen. Lose my ever loving mind. All right. Well, on that note, I think that we are about ready to sign off. Do you have anything else to say?
I do not.
All right. Why don't you tell the people good night?
Good night, everybody.
All right. Well, we appreciate y'all tuning in. Again, you can follow me on Instagram at Andrea Uplate. You can shoot me an email at andreauplate@yahoo.com. Andrea Uplate YouTube channel. The name is kind of across the board. You can follow Brian at Brian Sanders Sanders Disruptors on Instagram.
Yeah.
He's got a YouTube page of
the Disruptors. And then disruptorswithbriansanders.com.
Perfect. And that's his website where you can look at his classes and things like that. Again, visit Illicit Apparel Daily Threads for all of your awesome merch needs. And until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.